What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. For a little while now, we've been using the knowledge from some of our challenger analysts to help find you guys ways to improve at League of Legends, but in reality, a big part of actually getting better at the game is learning to recognize your mistakes. So today we've got a top 10 list for you guys from myself and our challenger analyst Ethug that is going to go into the most common mistakes that players make, which hopefully give you guys something to think about that might help you climb in your future games. And real quick before we start, I'm doing a $400 RP giveaway with myself and some other friends. It's super easy to enter, just check the link in the description and follow the instructions there. Now this top 10 list is going to be in no particular order, they all suck. But that said, if you enjoy the video, leave a like on it, let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe for some more videos. Kicking off our list today is something that is not usually an issue in higher elo, but is definitely very noticeable before that: the total lack of communication. League of Legends is a 5v5 game, and the team that works together the best is probably going to win no matter how good or bad the individual players are. That makes communication really valuable because you use it to coordinate with the players that you don't know, that you're not used to playing with. You can keep it to the simple stuff like just mentioning when your lane has no summoners, or talking about what objectives you need to take, or just simple things like that, pinging before you go in, or pinging where the enemy jungler is. Simple things like that can really go a long way to helping you win. Some people will recommend to tell you to mute everyone, and it's something I kind of do myself sometimes, and I've recommended it in the past. And that can help if you're the kind of person who's easily tilted like myself, but it definitely isn't going to stop you from pinging out your ultimate availability. You really can communicate just with pings for everything else. And overall, just making sure that you're making an effort to communicate in the game is really the most important thing, no matter how it's done. Now, our next common mistake is not playing to your team composition properly. Unlike our first one, this is something that you'll definitely see happen in every rank, and it doesn't only happen in solo queue either. You'll usually see this happen more frequently after a big shift in the meta, where players are starting to use new champions, new strategies, but don't necessarily bother to stop and think or truly understand how different the playstyle really is. And fixing this mistake is easy, play to your strengths. If you pick a split push champion, you should be split pushing. If your team has this crazy wombo combo style team comp for team fighting, then you should be grouping up and fighting as often as possible. Whatever champions you ended up picking, you need to stop and think about what the strengths of your own champion, your team's champions, and the overall composition are, rather than just brainlessly fighting and playing out the game. If you pick a late game composition, maybe forcing early game fights is not going to be that great for you. Keep your win conditions in mind, and if you aren't familiar with the champion, maybe look up a quick guide or some notes to get an idea for how you want to play and when they start to power spike. Next up is a mistake that's really a common issue because it's something that really players aren't really thinking about most of the time, and it's not setting up minion waves properly. You generally start to see people properly setting up minion waves, I guess maybe around Diamond Elo and above. Below that, it's just really not something people think about, and learning to balance minion waves or maybe start a slow push can be really effective for sieging, since it essentially lets you split push a lane without needing to dedicate a player to it. And it also sets you up for some really smooth rotations. For example, you can set up a slow push top, take mid tower, and then join in the minion wave pushing top after a quick rotation. Thanks to the added pressure from your minions, you essentially guarantee your mid turret kill because the opponents are going to have to send someone to clear the minions. And if they don't, the slow push is going to easily allow you to rotate and take the objective up top as well. And sometimes you're just going to end up getting both. And pushing out lanes is just a really important and effective strategy as well to maximizing the most that you get from your objectives. Following up on that one, our next mistake that players often make is not properly catching waves. The most important player in your solo queue game is of course yourself, so it's important to keep yourself ahead of the curve in terms of golden experience, and you never want to be losing out on free minions, so that means you need to learn to time your recalls, your rotations, with the minion waves. If you plan on going to the base, clear the next wave before you go back and push it out really hard so that by the time you get back to lane, you're going to get back before it reaches your tower. And the same goes for when you roam to other lanes. If you're mid and you want to go help bot lane, make sure you clear the wave before you go so you don't end up getting the wave pushed to your tower and wasted. Overall, the main concept is kind of just making the most out of your minions and making the most out of the amount of minions you can take in a game, since the gold that you're going to get from them really goes a long way. Another mistake that I see players making all the time is all about knowing when to dodge a game. You know, a lot of players maybe think that dodging is kind of like rude or something, or just not something they want to do, or whatever. For whatever reason, players don't really like to dodge that often. But at the end of the day, if you load into the champion select, you've got your teammates talking trash to each other, you're in a toxic lobby, or some of your teammates are taking just really horrible champions and you've got a horrible team composition, don't be afraid to leave the game and take that -3 penalty. You don't lose any MMR by doing this, so you actually don't get punished for it, and you'll get that LP back in future games. And your MMR is what really matters when it comes to the amount of LP you get per game. So if you think about it, actually playing and losing the game is of course going to hurt both your LP much more, also your MMR, and a lot of the times is just not going to be great. So if you don't feel good about a game heading into it, just don't bother. Dodge, move on to the next one. Now, our next thing that we want to talk about is a little bit similar to not playing your team comps correctly, and this time it's forcing bad team fights. You know, players get really aggressive since they know that kills are going to help them win the game, but you have to remember that all champions have their own scalings, and you've got to know which fights you can safely win, as well as which fights will be too close for comfort or maybe just total losses. And for most comps, you don't want to immediately pull the trigger when you see an enemy champion. It's a lot better to play smart, play slow, try to get some sort of advantage or thing going for you that's gonna allow you to come on top in that team fight. There are of course definitely situations that reward you for forcing fights, like if you have a great initiation ultimate or something like that, but if you don't have a really strong engage tool, you don't want to just go in too quickly and take too much risk. Although it does seem a little counterintuitive, you'll often find yourself winning games quicker if you take your time and don't force fights unnecessarily. And another one that kind of goes hand in hand with the previous one is taking bad fights around vision, or more specifically, fighting when you don't have vision. And we could have kind of kept those two together, but I think this deserves to be classed as a separate mistake since players really underestimate the importance of vision. You know, a lot of players are just like, oh, that's the support's job, you know, let the support handle the vision and I'll just kind of do my own thing. But that's not the case. You know, you really want to be contributing as much as possible. Every player on the team needs to, and you should always fight in places where you have vision. And, you know, players in every rank forget to do this because they're not thinking about other enemies. They're only thinking about the ones that they're actually seeing, the ones that they're actually fighting. And the team that fights with vision has a massive advantage because you can safely reinforce or back up your teammates, and overall allows you to set up for much better positioning. You can avoid a lot of damage by denying vision, and so establishing vision before a fight is a very easy way to push things in your favor, especially if you do it near an objective that you can follow up afterwards, like Baron. Now with our next one, it's probably the most common mistake that happens in League games, and that is tilting. And maybe it sounds a little vague, but at the end of the day, everyone experiences tilt to some degree, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to be tilted as long as you're using it to think about your gameplay, what you can do to improve, and most importantly, not letting the tilt affect your actual gameplay too much. You know, the thing is that players get really tilted after a bad game, and you might keep playing while tilted, which results in just this major tilt spree where you tilt off the face of the earth and you lose a massive string of games. The reality is that you can avoid that by just understanding when you are tilted, giving yourself time to bounce back, you know, take a break. Some people might want to take a break for a few hours, others maybe a few days or more, but either way, you should definitely consider perhaps playing another game or just doing something else if you find yourself being tilted. You're not going to have more fun losing games while you're still on tilt. You know, you just do something else. It's going to be more fun for you anyway to go do something else. Take a break. The next best thing as well is to just focus entirely on your own gameplay. You know, don't let the tilt make you start flaming your teammates. That's just going to make things worse. It's going to make your teammates worse, you know, they're going to play worse, and it's just going to make you feel worse too. Think about what you individually can do better, kind of detach yourself, you know, don't take the game personally, don't take what your teammates are saying personally, detach yourself from the game, give yourself a break, and come back with a fresh mindset. Now, in our next mistake, it's prioritizing kills over objectives, which is probably one of the worst mentalities you could possibly have in the game. The problem is that, well, everyone seems to have it because getting a kill is probably more fun than getting objective, but League of Legends is an objective-focused game, and you should only ever be thinking about kills if it's going to result in an easy objective, or is just kind of a free kill to pick up. Most of the time, the reward from the kill isn't really going to be worth the effort otherwise. You know, there is definitely value in picking up kills without getting an objective on top of it, but it's just should never be your main priority in the game. You can get 100 kills in a game and be no closer to winning if you're not translating those kills into objectives. So it's important to focus on objectives and more specifically, look for kills when they open up those objectives for you. Picking off a player for a numbers advantage before trying to take a neutral objective or a tower is a great way to give yourself a favorable fight. Just make sure that you aren't taking unnecessary risks to get it. You know, improve your vision game, start catching people out more around neutral objectives rather than wasting time hunting for kills. Now, another common mistake as well that we see all the time in League is people overstaying. And this happens actually all the time in high elo. I see this challenger players do this. There's tons of mid-game moments where one side wins a team fight, takes 2 turrets, but instead of being happy with the massive advantage, they end up staying, trying to take the 3rd turret as well. And maybe it works sometimes, but the defenders have a massive advantage because they've respawned at this point and they come back to wipe the team, and you end up losing a huge objective like Baron or some towers, and then throwing the game and losing because of it. And that's the most visible example of overstaying, and it's the most horrendous way to lose a game because it's so easily avoided, but at the same time is so common. It's really good that players are starting to pressure objectives after winning teamfights, but it's important to know what your limits are, watch the respawns, pay attention to the timing, and don't forget, even if you win a teamfight and take 2 towers, you don't have an advantage from it until you actually go back to base and buy items. Those extra items, of course, are going to make it easier for you to win the next team fight, and you can definitely end the game with a good Baron or inhibitor turret fight, so just take your time and know when it's time to cash in on that sweet advantage. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and I hope it maybe gave you something to think about that you didn't know, or maybe you knew, but now you're thinking about it a little bit more. Next time you catch yourself making one of these mistakes, you'll know what's happening, and hopefully you'll be able to prevent it too. Either way, looks like that's gonna be it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.